Let's call the work session for the County Board of Commissioners to order. Ask for the roll call.
Mr. Yes. Here. Mr. Bell.
Here.
Mr. Whistlecombe.
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg. Here. Mr. Hopperton. Here. Mr. Van Dam.
Here.
Mr. Holtward. Here. Mr. DeYoung.
Here.
Mr. Kyers.
Here.
Mr. Burton.
Here.
Mr. Penske.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next up is public comments and communication from staff. I think what we will do, if it's okay with the audience, is have our counsel give a verbal summary of his opinion. And after that time, he will be answering questions. What we would ask that you do is come to the podium and state your name, address, and then you can ask the question. We are wanting to keep everything on the record. So, Mr. Van Essen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. For those who do not know me, my name is Doug Van Essen, and for I think 32 years I've been the county's principal litigator, litigation counsel, representing the county whenever it is sued in court. And it's out of that capacity that I think the county administrator thought that it would be appropriate if I weighed in on this particular subject, because depending on what the commission decides to do, if anything, I would be the one that would have to defend Ottawa County in court. There's several other characteristics that I hold that I think may be well suited to weigh in on this particular question. I grew up in Hager Park. My uncle Jake Koistra, who served on this commission before his death, lived not too far away, and my grandfather lived even closer to Hager Park. And I spent a lot of my youth testing my running long jump skills, trying to go from one bank to the other in Hager Park. So I have a great affinity for this particular spot, and it's meant a lot to me over the years. I am the product of 20 years of parochial education. Grand Rapids Christian School System, Calvin College, and the University of Notre Dame Law School. And all of those institutions are really dedicated to the same premise that's behind Psalm 19, verse 1, which is you can take any particular subject. That particular passage looks at astronomy, but you can take any subject, and you, if you study it, can see the handiwork of God. That's what Psalm 19, verse 1 means to me. And as I said, all of my education has been dedicated to that particular proposition. So that subject means a lot to me. I am, and I hope people in the audience find this a great comfort, a serious Christian. I consider myself Christian Reformed. I grew up in that faith. For 25 years, I've been a member of Park Church in downtown Grand Rapids, Congregational Church. And I married a Catholic, and we live in Muskegon, so I regularly attend Mass at St. Francis de Sales, a big concrete church there on Kraken. So, technically, I am a Christian Reformed Congregationalist Catholic. My father isn't too happy with that, but I remind him that after practicing law for 30 years, he should be happy that any Christian group will accept him. At the University of Notre Dame, we study the concept of natural law as expressed by Thomas Aquinas. And natural law stands for the proposition, and if Aquinas were here today, he would say, you can find, of course, the expression of God's will in the Bible. As Psalm 19, verse 1 reminds us, we can find God's will reflected in nature. And God's will is also reflected, as some people today have alluded to, in the core concepts of Judeo-Christian government. And Aquinas would say that provision in the Declaration of Independence, which one woman read here today, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is not just Thomas Jefferson speaking. Those are divinely inspired words. And Aquinas, if you were here today, I believe, would tell you that the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, both the provision that says this state may not discourage the practice of religion, but also the provision in the First Amendment that says the state will not establish any particular religion, is divinely inspired. That in our fallen world, God does not intend a theocracy. God does not want Ottawa County to try to figure out whether it's Catholic, Congregationalist, or even Christian. I have appeared before a third of Michigan's county commissions in my 30 years of practice. And counties as large as Wayne County, as small as Iron County. And I've never done this before, but with your indulgence, I'd like to dedicate my opinion here today to two groups of people. 8 weeks ago, and another of your speakers today alluded to this, 8 weeks ago in Mosul, Iraq, 4 teenagers, 15-year-old children, they're surrounded by people who are so cowardly that they don't dare expose their face. And they were presented with a statement and an ultimatum. And the statement was this: the corruption that your religious faith brings to our society ends here. They were then presented with an ultimatum: you will reject and renounce your faith in Jesus Christ, or you will lose your head. And by all accounts, those teenagers trembled, they softly cried, they reached for each other's hands, they bowed their heads, and they lost their heads. Well, you might think this guy's getting awfully melodramatic. No one from Ottawa County has ever died defending the First Amendment. And I think that's technically true and untrue. To my knowledge, no one from Ottawa County has ever lost their life defending the First Amendment within Ottawa County. But on the beaches of Normandy, the trenches of France, the jungles of Vietnam, and yes, even in the desert surrounding Mosul, Iraq, people from Ottawa County, Michigan, Ottawa County, Illinois, Ottawa County, Ohio, have given their life and their lives for the core principles of our society. And I don't think there's anyone in this room that would deny that the most fundamental principle of our society and our government is the First Amendment. My opinions in this matter are relatively simple. The Constitution of the United States is broad enough to enable you to maintain your policy in the Ottawa County parks that John Schultz was enforcing largely when that sign was removed. That policy that says the only signage that we will allow in our parks is signage that's functional to the parks. Some of you may think that that policy infringes on your First Amendment rights of religious expression. And you would be wrong. There is nothing that prevents anyone here from wearing Psalm 19 on their t-shirt and having a church picnic in Hager Park where everyone wears Psalm 19 verse 1 on their t-shirt. And Ottawa County's Park Commission or any officials from Ottawa County that try to prevent you from expressing that particular opinion would be violating the the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. What may be surprising to some of you is that I also believe the Constitution is broad enough and pliable enough to allow that sign to be reinstated, but with certain limitations. You have the discretion to put that sign back up. But to be constitutionally compliant, certain limitations would have to accompany that sign. There would have to be a sign next to the sign that would say something like this: "Welcome, friends, to Ottawa County's Philosophical Park. It's cosmological park dedicated to the expressions of individual citizens who look at nature and discern from nature something about the origins of our existence." None of these signs that you see in this park are endorsed by Ottawa County. They may or they may not reflect the opinions of its elected and appointed officials or its employees. Then the Parks Department, if you were to go in this direction and you were to install such a cosmological park, would have to entertain other signs of similar sentiment. Someone may have a sign that says, "I look to the heavens and I see emptiness. There is no God." That sign would have to stand along with 19 verse 1. Someone may say, "I look at Hager Park and I see an intelligent designer, but I look at the pain and the suffering in our world and I think God is either dead or disinterested." That's a cosmological viewpoint. It's consistent with Psalm 19 verse 1 and in the sense that it looks at nature and it draws certain religious or philosophical conclusions. Also, all of these signs, including 19 verse 1, would have to periodically be removed because the United States Supreme Court is very clear on this. That where any sign expressing a particular philosophical or political point of view is placed, it must eventually be taken down. And this is why these Christmas displays and other displays at the state capitol or other town halls have to be taken down, or they become corporate speech. And the First Amendment will not allow, as Aquinas would recognize, a particular viewpoint to be espoused at the expense of any other. So, you could have such a cosmological park with those limitations, including the fact that these signs would periodically have to be removed, maybe to be reinstated, but they could not remain there indefinitely. Now, some have said even today, this seems to be inconsistent with the gift of the Hager family in 1960. We have researched that question, and it does appear as if the Hager family at some level endorsed that sign. They wanted that sign to go up. They did not condition their gift, as they could have, through restrictive covenant, so that if that sign is removed, the parkland must revert back to the Hager family. They apparently chose not to do that. If they had done that, what would be the implications for us today? The truth of the matter is that the courts are very clear that a restricted covenant that violates the Constitution cannot be enforced. There were many grants of public property for parkland purposes in the South that said, I give this property to Gwinnett County, Georgia. Let's say we'll pick on Gwinnett, for the purpose of a park as long as it's used for whites only. The courts had no problem saying that kind of a covenant cannot be enforced in court. And no public entity can accept such a covenant and bind itself legally to that proposition. So even if the Hager family had said that we give this parkland, as long as that sign stands unadorned by any restrictions, unaccompanied by any competing sentiment, the reality is that would have been illegal for the county to accept it, and such a covenant cannot be enforced today. Some have said, well, that sign has been there for so long that it's become a historical artifact. And there is case law to support that sentiment. When the World Trade Center was being excavated after 9/11, some of you may recall that almost miraculously, as the workers were pulling back the wreckage, two I-beams that were crossed in the shape of a cross emerged. And the workers were stunned and stopped. And for a period of time, they did not dare disrupt the wreckage. And a Catholic priest held a service underneath that wreckage. And many workers and many people in New York viewed it as a rebuttal to the sign that I suggested earlier, that God is dead or disinterested. They saw it as a sign that God was present in the 9/11 reconstruction. And today that I-beam sits in the 9/11 museum. And certain atheists challenged that. They said the only purpose for that artifact in this museum is its religious significance. And the Second Circuit rejected that argument and said it may mean that to people. It may have meant that to people. But it is now part of the history of 9/11. And it may be grouped with other artifacts from that disaster and that tragedy as part of the 9/11 story. There is nothing in the display of that cross in that context, with that grouping, with those other artifacts, that is an endorsement by the state of Christianity. It's simply a reflection of the meaning that so many people drew from that sign. So we could take this sign and we could make it part of a parks collection, a museum piece. And we could have the first picnic table ever installed in an Ottawa County park, or some implements from the Ottawa County farm. And we could collect all these things as historical artifacts. But I don't think that would satisfy anyone. It wouldn't satisfy me. Who draws inspiration from Psalm 19. Verse 1 is the living, breathing Word of God today. It would be relegated to a historical artifact status that I don't think would be satisfactory to anyone. So these are your options that you need to weigh in the coming months. And I know there are people here today, and I respect their viewpoint, that think that somehow this is a sad day in Ottawa County's history. A sad day that a few people have interrupted and destroyed what so many of us have been doing over the years. And I'm not going to say that that viewpoint is wrong, but I will say this, that I think that your decision as you grapple with this is a great opportunity for Ottawa County. I have the fantasy that I'm not 58 years old, but I'm 28. And I'm part of a Navy Team SEAL that could have swept in and rescued those children in Mosul, Iraq, just 8 weeks ago. And in my fantasy, as we're pulling away in the helicopter and these scared teenagers are looking at me, I could say to those children, you're going to a safe place. You're going to Ottawa County, Michigan, where the strongmen, the people with guns, will defend your right to worship whatever God you so desire. And where the County Board of Commissioners, the elected politicians of the county, stand vigilant to ensure that not one particular religion is endorsed over another. And if I could be so bold to speak for those who cannot speak, who gave their lives wearing the United States uniform of the armed services, I would say this: there are a few things that are worth giving your life for. But the First Amendment and its protections, both of religious exercise, but also that we not establish one particular religion over another, one particular denomination or another, is one of those few things that is worth giving their lives for. And I think if we could poll the people that actually gave their life, most of them would say, the most common thing that they would say, we gave our lives for the First Amendment. So, does it take some courage for the commissioners not to put that sign up if it's going to be part of a philosophical or cosmological part? Yeah, I think it does, because we have representative democracy, and people in their first blush may think that this is something that's anti-religious. They may not understand it. It takes a certain amount of courage to stand up for the First Amendment and say that we're not going to do something that maybe most people want you to do. But I think by doing that, even though that exercise of courage fails compared to what those students did 8 weeks ago and what those soldiers did in giving their lives, I think it honors the First Amendment. I think it honors that sacrifice. I think Jesus was in a position, put in a position by the Pharisees, very similar to the position all of you commissioners are in here. And if you'll recall, Jesus said something that I think is very relevant. He said, in our fallen world, there are times when you must give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. That sign belongs to God. Hager Park belongs to Caesar. As long as we live in a fallen world, which we live in, Hager Park cannot include that sign all by itself. I think Jesus understands that. And I think Jesus, in his words, endorsed that. Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer questions that the commissioners have regarding my opinion, or that members have.
Anyone have questions for Mr. Bennett? Entertain questions from the audience for Mr. Vanessa. Step to the podium and give us your name and address.
Pastor Roger Walcott from Jamestown Baptist Church. There not only was a sign, but over the years there was a large stone. Was that removed?
As far as I know, the stone is still there.
And there's a scripture on that sign.
I'd be
Is
happy.
that going to be removed?
In my opinion, the rock to which you're referring to does not have to be removed. It has not been removed by the Parks Department, and you will see, in my opinion, which will be made available to you, that I spend quite a bit of time anticipating that that may be the next challenge. That sign, for those of you who don't know, says something to the effect, right here. To the glory of God, in the memory of our forefathers and their pioneering spirits, donated to the Ottawa County Parks Trustees by Francis M. and Titus W. Hager, 1960 AD. In my opinion, this plaque and this memorial may remain for time immemorial. And the difference is that this is an expression by the Hager family of their motivation for why they gave the property to Ottawa County. Clearly, this is the Hagers speaking, and it's the Hagers declaring their own religious principle. And you will see that I reference a case out of Chicago where a particular family made a donation in a brick. You've seen these in Grand Rapids where they have these fundraisers for parks. A brick, you can donate a brick, and you put a little family sentiment on there. And this family said, God is our rock, is the rock of our family. And the Parks Department wouldn't let that particular brick go into the collection. And the courts ordered them to put that brick in. And the difference is that they recognize what I'm recognizing here, that that's an expression by a particular family of their religious belief. And the First Amendment protects that exercise as a statement by a family. And it may be in a public place, it may be in a public park without violating the First Amendment. But it's clear it's their personal expression. It is not an expression by the Chicago Parks Department. It's not an endorsement of that viewpoint, but rather a manifestation of individual expression. So the rock and its plaque may be made.
I've not gone up before a lawyer before. You have a good presentation, but I can see, and many others can see, that this is a systematic elimination of Christianity. I don't know if you were there, but in the 1970s, we had a similar problem with an evolution display, and we brought a complaint to the commission about that display. It showed evolution from beginning to end, and we as a church and other Christians made a definite decision against that. In fact is, some of the men that were on this board did not fully understand. One of our members said, I will pay if you will put a Christian presentation in there. And they came up and said they wanted the board to do that. Maybe none of you were on the board at that time. That isn't what we said. In fact, is I have some relative right here tonight, this morning or this afternoon, that said they would still do that. So it's the creation elimination. It's the sign elimination. It's the stone elimination. That's exactly what the devil wants to happen in this community.
Amen. Amen.
I'm old enough to know that I remember Dr. Harry Hager, that was his brother, an outstanding Reformed preacher from Chicago. And I know that my uncle, great uncle, was a strong supporter, and this family wanted this piece of property to be dedicated to God, and the people who would come would see God's glory and God's handiwork in it. And I, for one, strongly oppose the removal of this sign or other evidences that the Hager family wanted to have. And I want to thank you very much for your time.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Jim Chiodo, 2199 West Spring Gardens, Holland, Michigan. As I listen to the words, I understand the logic of it. I understand its reason. It's an explanation. Now, my assumption is that the board members will probably make a decision based on what he said. Sort of like, wow, if we fight this thing, we're going to lose. And that's going to be county money, taxpayer money, and so on and so forth. If there was a national legal organization willing to come in and take this case pro bono, would it be appropriate for that national law firm to represent Ottawa County? Or would it be appropriate for that national law firm to represent a group of citizens, some of them in this room? I've just been in touch with somebody connected with them, and I guess that question will go to them and to the groups. But I wanted to make you aware, as board members, that Liberty Counsel out of Florida. I believe they're standing ready to take this case up. I guess I'll be talking to them some more. Thank you.
Reverend Tyler Wagner, 5166 64th Avenue, Hudsonville, Michigan, pastor of Beaver Christian Reformed Church. Again, some very, very thoughtful words from a fellow graduate of Calvin College, and certainly something I'm sure that you pondered and will continue to ponder. One of the things, just dealing philosophically and religiously too, to continue to keep in mind, and as sometimes perhaps you decide to, this might end up going to the courts perhaps, is what does it mean to establish religion or not? Again, I go back to that verse. Does that establish a religion? Who really has claim to that particular verse? Is it a particular denomination? Is it even a particular faith? I know, again, just off the top of my head, that there are for sure two major faiths that can lay claim to that, regardless of the denominational breakdowns even of those. The question is that really an establishment of religion, to quote from the book of Psalms? Secondly, gets into a deeper issue of what does it mean to establish religion? If you have a quote-unquote naked square, a naked park, Hickory Park, without any definitive religious statement at all, could you make a solid case saying that that itself is an establishment of a religion? Not a religion that is a theistic religion, or religion that is an atheistic religion. There is no such thing as everyone who doesn't have religion. Everyone has a religion. The question is, what is your religion? What is your highest commitment in life? Different people disagree on that, obviously. In our nation, we respect that. I know the reference was made to Iraq. I served in Iraq, and I saw the violence, or I saw people die. But as a result of that, the implication that we are a different nation, and we very much are a different nation, but that in some ways, if we, in removing that sign, we could possibly be not in the vote of those who would force people to convert or die. That raises the question again, does a sign force people to convert or to die? I would say that that's an inappropriate analogy. But again, it goes back to also, what does it mean to establish religion? Is the naked square establish a religion? By removing that sign, does that also communicate to the citizens of Ottawa County, we have a religion, and the religion is there is no God, and we will not acknowledge him? I think we have to more deeply philosophically, and I would say even eventually the Supreme Court has to more deeply philosophically, religiously grapple with that. To back off of this question, I think would do a disservice not only to the citizens of Ottawa County, do a disservice to our whole nation, of a debate, an ongoing discussion we continue to need to have. And so let's not pull back from that discussion. Let's not pull back in fear from that debate, even on a litigation side. This is something that goes to the warp and woof, the heart of who we are as Americans, as a free society, a religious society, a society that does believe in God we trust. And that says something.
Thank you.
If I could just respond to the statement, and just so the commission understands again the nature of my opinion, the courts would tell you that you can create a forum. When you dedicate, they would say our courthouse steps are automatically our forum, because historically, not necessarily in Ottawa County, but in communities across our society, the courthouse is a forum. And the front area of that park is a forum. In Grand Rapids, where I practice, the Calder Plaza is a forum. And you can put a Christmas creche in your forum, but then you must also allow the menorah in your forum. You must also allow the views of atheists and agnostics in your forum. So, a park without a forum is constitutional. And historically, our parks have not been forums. we can make Hager Park or a portion of that park a forum. What we cannot do is limit viewpoints in that forum. So if you want to put that sign back up and you want to create a forum, that is an option. But you must also include non-Christian signage in that forum. That is the challenge for the board. Do you change Hager Park from a picnic park to a forum where you will be confronted with views that you probably do not like and that will be controversial and that will make it uncomfortable for you to take your 7-year-old or 8-year-old there because you're not ready for that discussion of what those signs mean. That is the challenge of this question. And it really is a beautiful First Amendment expression because the board needs to make that decision. Are they going to create a forum for that kind of thought?
Hey, good morning. I can appreciate having legal counsel.
Can you state your address for the record?
10345 60th Avenue, Allendale, Michigan. I sat on a board where there's legal counsel to help too. One of the things they told us was that many of the laws, zoning ordinances, and rules that we applied or passed, if ever argued or brought to court, would be found unconstitutional. And because nobody had the money to take us to court, that allowed us to put these ordinances upon the people, and they had to abide by them. Unique statement. He's an attorney, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your words. Many of the things you said protect me. But I would also say, as I said before, every one of you, I believe, pledged allegiance to that flag under God. Every one of you, I believe, bowed your head and used the name Jesus. Why did you bow your head? I would challenge you, it's supposed to be because you're acknowledging God is over you and you are bowing down before Him. If you do that in this forum, how can you not allow a sign that says nothing about who God is, what God is, does not establish one religion? Like I said, when you read the Constitution, and I understand what the Supreme Court said, I don't necessarily agree with all the courts say do it. When you look at the Constitution and the relevance to when it was followed, what the people were living at that time, and you want to understand what they wrote. They left Europe to get away from the one founded government, or one founded religion, which was the Catholic Church. And they came to this country on boats that none of us would dare, I would gather, to even try, and risk everything they had, including life, to have an ability to come here. That sign, if it forces somebody to believe one way or another, I find it truly remarkable. I don't have a problem with what he said about allowing other signs because I believe it is our responsibility to teach our young children what other opinions there are out there and why our way is the right way. Because if you can't acknowledge why your way is the truth, then you have a problem. You have sworn an oath to the Constitution of the United States that these founding fathers put in place. Not to be able to argue and win a case. I know somebody who has been fighting some cases recently, has poured everything he's got into it to fight for truth. May not have won, but I challenge you this, there is a day when a true judge will look at this case and he will win. Because the truth does win. See, a lot of people in Ottawa County don't know what all goes on behind the scenes. I've learned a lot, and I've been disappointed. Listen to your attorney, but always remember why he's telling you what he's telling you. He's trying to defend this in court and on a national scene. Sometimes you got to do what's right for the right reason, not do what's wrong for the wrong reason.
My name is Kenneth David. I'm from 15896 Comstock Street, Grand Haven, Michigan. And I wanted to just let everyone know here that I believe in God, but I also believe in the devil. And I am offended by the fire pits and the fire boxes that are inside of Hager Park every time they're lit. It reminds me that I may have to go to hell. So I am offended by all those fire pits and those fire boxes that are in Hager Park. And I suggest if you go forward with the way you're doing this, you need to have those removed also. Thank you.
My name is Matthew Konya, 6560 Paulson Avenue, Hudson. What's the idea of this sign?
Can't hear.
6560 Balsam Drive, Hudsonville, Matthew Konya. Ladies and gentlemen in this room, the idea of this sign goes much deeper than politics. It goes much deeper than legal issues. The idea goes back to original intent. This gentleman here defined the Constitution through the lenses of Aquinas, not through the Founding Fathers. And while the Founding Fathers did take examples and ideas and some philosophies from Aquinas, they also included philosophies and ideas from Francis Bacon, from John Locke, and several others. The idea of the Constitution stating that government shall not establish a religion was for the intent that the government and the state would not forcibly create an established state church, such as the Church of England. That was their intent. That was the reason they included this in the Constitution. My friends here today, the government did not establish a religion. The government or the state did not set up this sign. Its people set up this sign. And while we dwell on the idea of original intent, the original intent of the Hagers was to donate this park so that people could see the glory of God demonstrated among the natural wonders.
Amen.
Amen.
If we want to go about this legally, then my friends, should we not give back the property back to the family of the Hagers? Well, this gentleman stated a court case in the South. He stated about they would not be able to accept property due to somebody regulating that this park had to be used for whites only, and if we cannot accept this, we cannot do this, we cannot honor the request. Well, if we can no longer honor the request, then let's rip the park from the hands of the people and give it back to the Hagers. My friends, back when this park was donated, you could buy a house on a handshake. And yeah, there's no legal document stating this sign must be there, but let us honor our heritage. Let us honor those who have gone before us. And while the gentleman said, hey, make sure you just put up a sign that says this Bible verse in there, and then the guy said, okay, yeah, we'll do that for you. That was the original intent. He didn't think he needed to have a written document. Let's think logically about this. There's no legal document. He didn't think he would need one. He didn't think that people would be debating this in a boardroom one day. The argument was made from the lawyer that this was not an anti-religious act. My friend, if you look at why it was removed, that it was anti-religious. They said, we don't want any hint of religion. We don't want any hint of God. We don't want any hint of any belief anywhere around us, so get it out of here. And it was gone. My friends, that is anti-religious by definition.
Amen. Amen.
You could put a sign in the park that shares different cosmological views. But let us all know this, reasonably, logically, that sign is there and has been accepted for so long. because we are a Christian community. I'm not afraid to say that. These people are not afraid to say that. We are a Christian community. Everybody knows this is a Christian place. It's not a Muslim place. It's not a Hindu place. And while those people are welcome here, this is a Christian community. Many times have I heard the phrase saying, we don't lock our doors at night. Let's think about how many of us in our minds do we lock our doors at night? Why? Because the moral restraint from the Christian faith has controlled men down throughout our area's history.
Do you have any other questions for the attorney? You've gone past your 3 minutes.
And let me conclude by saying this. America is the most civilized nation in the world. It has gotten there because of the faith of the people, the beliefs of the people, the moral fabric of the people. And while this gentleman thinks that if we have a sign to God, then we need to have signs that are inappropriate to children who are 7 years old, why? Why, may I ask you? Does it have to be? Have we gotten this far? From founding fathers who gave their life to establish a nation based upon Judeo-Christian values, to now saying, if we allow God in our places, if we allow God in our parks, then we also have to allow inappropriate signs that we don't want to have discussions about in front of 7-year-olds. Must we do that? Have we come to a civilization so debased, so full of debauchery, that we have to put those signs up by law? Yes, actually, one second, and I apologize for going over. Who made this policy that there shall be no signs erected they'll have to be for information only? Who was that? What was their name? Who was that? My friends, we are the government. We are the government. And while there is legal counsel, we are the government. We can change that policy. We can vote out the people who have made that policy.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
I apologize, sir.
Any other comments? Any other questions for the attorney? Please keep your questions to the attorney.
I have a question for the board. Can I? Thank you. My name is Mike Kuras. I'm Spring Lake, 18246, Lost Creek Lane. I really have 3 remarks, really directed to you, not to Doug. The first question is, what is the board's plan to resolve this question? The reason I say that is that you've had the opportunity to receive a very elaborate opinion from counsel, and I have 3 minutes. It's a little unfair. So I'm expecting that the board will have some period of time in which it will entertain other opinions and some process to resolve it. And I would like to understand what that is. No answer right away. Second question. As you make this decision, I would like to ask each of you to ask yourself personally, am I going to make this decision based solely on what I really believe the right answer is, or am I going to think about the financial implications? And if this starts to cost Ottawa County $5 million, well, maybe I'll change my mind. So I get a less expensive, heartfelt opinion. That's just a question to all of you as commissioners. My third comment is that I disagree with some of what Doug said. And I would like the opportunity, so that's my first question, to express that. I believe that the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, is enshrined in our First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, extends not just to individuals, but to communities, provided it does not extend into coercion. So I believe that the right question to ask is not whether or not a particular idea is offensive or not, but does an individual and does a community have the right to express its views? So if Ottawa County has a view, is it prohibited from expressing it? And I believe that communities are real, they are protected by the First Amendment, even though current interpretations of the courts
Support that.
my time's up.
Judy Curtis from Sealand Township. I'm not near as eloquent as many of the previous speakers, but in regard to the sign, and it appears, I haven't studied all the details, but it seems that the sign was deliberately put there by the family. And I'm assuming that, well, so that family is still living, or at least their descendants, couldn't there just be an additional sign next to it saying, this sign is here because this family wants it here, and this is why they gave this park to this community. And that would take care of it, the same as the stone. It was intended by the family, so if the sign was intended by the family, put an additional sign next to it, and that would cover that argument. I also am tired of having all of these one small little group deciding what the rest of us are going to have or not have in our communities, in our newspapers, everywhere, our signs. It is just pathetic. Why can one guy, and I don't know that I know this all for sure, but my understanding is this man moved here from Hawaii to create this ruckus. And he did the same thing in Hawaii and caused all kinds of similar things. Now there has to be a way to fight that. It is just pathetic. We have thousands of people who believe this sign is fine. One guy moves in the community, decides to fight it, has the money, and fights it, and we're too scared to fight him back. I just heard a speaker at the January series today, a lady who now is in her 70s, who was a child survivor of the Holocaust. Her ending comments were, because of course a lot of the students were there in Colonel Calvin, and kind of like what she would say to those people, those students, and people of that generation is, if you hear it, believe it. Don't just think, oh, that won't happen, that won't happen. My dad even didn't believe it when it first started happening. And she said, when you start hearing, seeing all these little things, they are happening, and we need to fight it. Not just sit back and worry about spending money or worry about whatever other people are going to think. If this is what you believe, then do something about it and fix it. And possibly something as simple as an additional sign.
Any other comments?
Abigail Noble, Sealand Township, speaking for residents of Sunset Inn. Not all of them, certainly. As a fellow Calvin grad, I appreciated hearing you speak. And as a recent Hillsdale graduate with my master's in politics, I appreciated your references to natural law. I think you made the case well that having the sign in a county park under county auspices, I might just go on. I think you made the case that that would be an example of government speech. I think some of the speakers from the audience also made the case that speaking for a community is what local government does. I think our point of difference, and this is where my question comes in, is there any good reason why we can't go back to the founder's intent that limited the voice of government in freeing individual speech? So that even though this sign may not represent every single individual head for head, it does represent two concepts that are foundational to our country, which are distinctively Christian concepts. Toleration and limited government are supported by the Christian religion and biblical concepts, not by any other major world religion or philosophy. And that is why equal opportunity to speak does not apply. To my way of thinking, there is every reason for the government to post the Christian principles that undergird our way of life and to exclude those which do not. Indeed, they really should be posting more of these if we expect our way of life to survive. Thank you.
Any other questions for the attorney? Seeing none, we'll continue with our work session.
Can we ask
What is
the
the-
Can we ask the attorney to respond to those last couple of questions? I'm sorry, sir, what was your name?
Mike Furrow.
Mike. Mike is right. The courts do not recognize that the community has First Amendment rights collectively. And that's why, as part of my opinion, I know that we can't have community speech that endorses even Psalm 19, verse 1. The courts are very clear on that. Whether that should be changed or not is worth, I guess, debating, but the courts have so far indicated that our founding fathers did not intend to give individual rights under the First Amendment to Ottawa County as a corporate entity. And in fact, Mike is right. The courts would tell us, if we brought this matter to them, that we cannot have a corporate speech, even if it reflects 90% of the sentiment of the county in support of Psalm 19, verse 1. So if people want to change that, fortunately, they need to change that in Washington. That would not be changed in Michigan. And the federal courts would be very clear that individuals are protected. Ottawa County, ironically, is not protected as a corporate entity to make a religious statement. That would be the establishment of religion under our current constitutional viewpoint and would absolutely be prohibited by the First Amendment.
Any questions of the commission? How would you like to proceed from here?
I guess a couple of things. One is, personally, I wish we were talking about whether or not to take the sign down rather than put the sign back up. I think that was a mistake for that sign to come down without us having this discussion first. We are where we are. And should I ever have to walk up to the courtroom steps that Mr. Nesson alluded to, I would certainly like to have him accompany me and be my counsel. However, I'm not totally in agreement with all of your positions. I understand what you're recommending to us is based on your reading of the law, and the law that you read is interpreted by judges who have offered their opinions, right or wrong, on what the Constitution means and what it says. And, while we place those judges there, and that's part of our government, we're sitting in a room full of judges, people that have elected us, we're accountable to them, and I believe that it's our obligation to represent their views, values, and beliefs, just as it's your obligation and duty to represent what you read in the law. So I am not at all ready to walk away from this issue. I can't say that I've got a clear vision as to what the next step should be, but if it was my decision, the sign would go up yesterday. And it's not my decision, it's going to be a collective decision. And I think that I'd like to have this board, you know, if we're not willing to deal with it, you know, I mean, we can't deal with it, you know, make a decision right now, but I would like to see us give it a lot more consideration. Any other comments? Yes. I mean, I guess I look at it as, you know, it's a decision that we have to make. Do we wait 6 months to make it, or do we make it in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks?
The decision really is to sign back up with the stipulation that it be a, as our attorney said, a park that has this statement in it. And in so doing, we say this is the only park in the system, in our county's park system, that we do this. And are we ready to allow other opinions to be in that park also? That's the question.
It's either that or to stand by the Parks Commission with the signs removed.
And I guess if administration came back with our next meeting, a vote, for instance, on whether or not to put the sign back up with that stipulation, we can vote it down, or yes or no. And if we voted it down, that's it. If we vote it up, it goes up with a stipulation. The attorney talked about.
But I don't think that's necessarily true either. I mean, there's honest people in the room that have different opinion on it. But we could vote as a board to put it up with no stipulation.
Good.
Absolutely. But I think that's something that we've got to spend some more time talking about, because probably most of the people here are ready to make a decision on if the stipulation is to come or not. We have to come to some kind of agreement on what that vote would be, right?
We would have to, I mean, we have to have the understanding that if we say the sign goes back up with no stipulations, not making it a philosophical park, the ramifications of that decision. See, I'm not sure I'm still on board with all that. You know, if we were talking about somebody coming to us or to the Parks Department asking to put up a new sign that had not been there until today. To me, that is totally different than what we're talking about here with a sign that, to me, has historical significance. You know, based on my understanding, the donation of at least 25 acres of this park came with a stipulation that this sign goes up. And I'm not willing to walk away from that, or you know, some of the sentiments were expressed here today. So,
well, I'd like to move forward a little bit and see what Mr. Chada had to say regarding perhaps some financial support from outside agencies even. I think we need to look at it, you know, for a couple of weeks here yet. I don't know whether that's even, you know, a viable board of commissioners meeting.
with a motion at that point, that
Either a motion with the cosmological park, or just a straight motion of putting the sign up.
So either or?
Either or, having, at least have an option. I know that muddies it a little bit.
I think, you know, we'd have to have a third option. The third option would be to stand by the
Stand by it, move it down, yes.
I mean, we could draft 3 options and you could choose one. But if you ask administration to bring you an option, I don't know how we choose other than what the council has said is a legal option.
Right. No, I think
So that's why I think that either you need to tell us what you want the resolution to be, or we need to bring 3 resolutions and you pick one, I guess.
That's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
How are we gonna vote on 3? How are we gonna vote on 3?
I think we can bring an option just to consider this in 2 weeks. Whatever option we decide, in 2 weeks, we will decide. We don't have to have clear-cut option at this point, or what are we gonna decide in 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, we will decide this issue.
Yeah, whoever makes the motion, if the motion gets no support, it fails, we can go from there, that's easy enough. I don't think you need to make an option for it.
I don't even, so I'll make a motion.
We can't in this session.
I'm sorry, you're right, we can't.
So what are you saying, Phil?
I'm saying you can make your motion, if it gets no support, it fails, or then you can make his motion, if it gets no support, it fails, and we can have 2 or 3 different motions, whoever one gets support, who gets the most votes, that's where we go.
Motion.
We'll make motions out of it.
Right. So we can
Not
put,
everything on the agenda.
we can put the issue on the agenda for,
Right.
in 2 weeks. And we will make a decision one way or another in 2 weeks.
It wasn't mine.
Is that okay with everyone?
The motion would be subject to changes. It's not going to be presented as pick 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
That could, right.
Once the motion's on the table, it can be amended.
Sure.
I hope Mr. Vince will be available to us if you need that meeting.
I'll make myself available.
Okay, anything else?
Of course.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.